to another episode of the JK Experience. I tell you what, I think I'm going to give James a complex because he has not been on these recent podcasts, and he doesn't get these opportunities to be interviewing some amazing people here. But I tell you what, I am so excited today, you guys. We've got an amazing guest. Sharran Srivatsaa is not only I would consider a great close friend, but also just a massive mentor of mine, and has really it made a really big impact in my life, and we get to have him on the show today. So Sharran, thank you so much, dude. I know you're busy. I know you're impacting so many people's lives, and you took some time today to be with us. So thanks, brother.
I do, and I'm super excited. And people don't realize how hard this stuff is, right? Like we got to get our schedules worked out, get schedules kind of lined up, get tech, get all the systems working. And there's people think this is just production of the podcast. The pre and post is probably 10 times of the actual recording of the show. So thank you for having me. I know how hard this is because I have my own show too. So I get it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. Well, and you gave me some grace because I was running a little bit late because of, things happen. And, as leaders, as business owners, we have to be able to adjust a little bit. And the fact that you showed grace for me this morning was just, once again, indicative of the man that you are. So I just want to give everybody just a little bit of a glimpse of who you are. You were a former professional tennis player, by the way, which is amazing. My wife absolutely loves this. She's a huge fan of tennis and is playing that now in her life. And so she's very intrigued to have more conversations with you about that. And that wasn't even something of a dream of yours, but we're going to get into that. But so former professional tennis player, went to college in the States, was from India originally, went and was hired by Goldman Sachs after 39 interviews, which is not including all the other things that you did in order to get to that point, which is amazing. Grew an amazing company in TELUS, and basically 10x that within 5 years. And then sold that company. But then you're an entrepreneur. You're a part of some amazing things out there that are going on. You're an angel. You're part of an angel fund group as well too. I mean, the list goes on. And when I was reading this, and of course, obviously doing even more research, because you're such a humble man, you don't really share a lot of these things that you're a part of. One of the things that I got to tell you that I was just so impressed with is that you are part of not only a couple venture capitalist groups, which is amazing, but also it was the where I'm going to find it, the Genius Network. You are part of that, and I mean, even by saying that, I'm like, that's pretty badass right there, dude. Like that is like awesome. So, dude, I tell you what, your credentials are amazing, and you continue to just keep adding to them.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, and the interesting part is. Let's talk about the first thing that you just said, right? So I think that a tightly wound entrepreneur is an ineffective one, right?
Yeah.
In our conversations, I remember our first deep dive when you and I were brainstorming, like literally we went through our calendars, right?
Yeah.
And like I'm like, what do you do Monday? Like literally, and people won't believe this stuff, but this is super important. And when you talked about, running late or whatever, the tightly wound entrepreneur is an ineffective entrepreneur. And so the first thing my mom calls this, if there's any gift that we can give everybody, my mom calls this, the universal rule, right? It's the law of linear time. Mm. We think we need systems, we need tools, we need visions, we need mission, we need all of that. Yes. But that is all in support of linear time. And so the more people think that they can cram in and pack in, the less they understand their true worth in this world. So if there's something that we can all do for ourselves would be to craft our days with a little space, because margin is really powerful. So even if we do anything else, like just a couple of 15, 30-minute blocks here, you feel like you're unproductive, but you're not. Like your body needs time to integrate. Your mind needs time to integrate. That's the time where you transition from call to call, meeting to meeting, idea to idea. And so the tightly wound entrepreneur is an ineffective one. So that's the gift that we can give ourselves.
Well, and I really appreciate that we hit that so early on in this podcast, because I think one of the challenges that we're always faced with is that, to be an entrepreneur, you've got to get up way before everybody gets up. You've got to go to bed way later than everybody goes to bed. You've got to do massive amounts of work and productivity throughout the day. You've got to be so stacked and so proficient in all your stuff. And one of the things and the tools that you have taught me and really helped me understand is that I do have to create more space in those days. Not only that, I love this concept that I have just been repeating and telling all of our leaders constantly. It has been a personal growth strategy for me too, is the flame work, right? And so I'd love to just maybe dive into that just really quick about why it's so important as an entrepreneur, as a creator, as a CEO, as a leader. You need to be putting this flame work in your life. And I tell you, it was a really big eye opener for me to realize, wow, I'm not doing enough of it, and I'm not doing it often enough.
Yeah, totally. And I'd say this is probably, if folks can take this stuff seriously, the simplest of things can move the needle a lot. It's one of those, the small hinges swing big doors type thing, right? So picture, one of my mentors taught me this. So picture, as you're driving, as you're working out with Josh and me today, picture this really old church candle. I got to actually find a picture of this, Josh. A really old church candle sitting in the background, and it's got a big flame, but it's been there decades, generations. It's a big, big fat wax candle. And the reason why the flame is so bright is because of the wick and the wax. But at the same time, the wax is dripping, the wax is there. The wax is a result of the work that we do. And at some point, we need to realize what lights us up, and that's the flame. And then we also need to realize the supporting infrastructure, we need the wax. And so the wax work and the flame work is really important. So the first thing about the wax work is, as an entrepreneur, as we're growing and building stuff, we have to do some of those things. But the flame work is where we really get lit up. The flame work is where we suddenly look at time and it's like, whoa, where did that 2 hours go? Mm-hmm. And that's really, really powerful. And I have a couple of quick things about flame and wax work. The flame work is, there can't be more than three things. Not for, I use three as an arbitrary number, but there's a really funny thing that one of my friends told me. He says, 1, 2, 3 too many, right? It's hilarious for me. He's like, hey, we just can't remember this stuff. That's not how we're wired. It's 1, 2, 3 too many. Like, why do they say 1, 2, 3 go? They don't say 1, 2, 3, 4 go. Like, why? Right? It's the 1, 2, 3 too many. So when you and I were kind of brainstorming, I was like, hey, what are the three things that we work on? And I remember during my TELUS days as well, there were three things that I worked on, and it was growth, culture, and innovation. If it was not one of those three things, I didn't do it. That was my flame work. And I would offer everyone to think about, hey, if you only could do three things and those three things alone, what would that be? And that would be your flame work. Now, that's it's how even the Elon Musks of the world and who, the greats like Steve Jobs, they did flame work, but they had to do wax work too. You still have to do laundry. You still have to do groceries. You still have to work out. You still have to drive to work. There's wax work in there. The wax work is just administration. I call this my favorite word. I call this life admin, right? Life admin is a super interesting thing, but you kind of have to do it. There's no other choice. But the wax work, as long as you can recognize, is everything that's not in your top three. And that's totally cool, but you're doing this. And there's two things, Josh, when it comes to wax work. A lot of the entrepreneurs will say, well, hey, you know what? I don't have a marketing director, so I'm going to have to do the marketing and the copywriting myself. I understand. That's cool. Right. Or, hey, I don't have an operations manager, so I'm going to have to build these Zaps and the Trello boards myself. I get it. That's cool. But when it comes to wax work, just like the flame work has three, the wax work has two requirements. Requirement number one on the wax work is this. It's okay to do wax work if you leave a system behind. So totally cool. Where I'm just going to be like, hey, I'm going to build something. I'm going to do it for a while. Great. Once I'm done with this, I am done. I don't have to do this again. So it's okay if you need to spend 6 months building out a marketing plan, but after you're done doing that, hopefully a bunch of it is automated or outsourced. So it's okay to do that when to leave a system behind. But second, this is what will impact most entrepreneurs is this. Wax work is a great way to think about it's a for now work, for now. So it's like, hey, I'm doing the cold calls. It's just for now until we hit a certain sales. I'm doing the customer service on a different alias. I created a different name called Jenny@support.com. I know people do that all the time. It's totally fine because now it's a for now. So it's okay to do that. The reason, Josh, that we get really, really sad, depressed, resentful is that we think our entire life is going to be wax work. We think we're going to have to do admin or whatever, the things that we're not impressed by all our life. And so I always force people to think about those two things. Hey, number one, are you leaving a system behind? Cool. That's good. And number two, is it a for now? And for now means there's an end date to it. So you and I always talk about, hey, I'm going to do this until February and then I'm done. cool, awesome. As long as there's an end date to it, our mind knows that it doesn't have to slog through this for, for eternity. And when you do that, then you say, okay, cool, I'm going to spend more time in my flame and my wax. And that's a really good question to ask, which is like, hey, you should be able to look at your calendar and say flame, wax, flame, wax. And if you have a week, a lot of times people tell me like Wednesday, man, I'm really tired. I'm like, let's look at your calendar. There's a good chance that it was stacked with a bunch of wax work on Monday and Tuesday. And that's why you're tired.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's so true. When I was reevaluating my calendar, especially after you and I spoke, that's exactly what I did, and I even did it again for the fourth quarter because, as you and I know, like things especially in our businesses, they're constantly changing, and we have to continue to keep evolving, right? And sometimes that flame work is for a season in that department, and then flame work is another chapter, another thing, another venture that you're doing. And so it's so important for us to continue to be looking at those calendars to make sure that we're adjusting to our lifestyle, right? So I'd like to talk just a little bit more about, so when you grew up, I thought this was a really interesting thing. You and I spoke about this just briefly before this, but I grew up where my parents basically said, hey, listen, we're going to sacrifice everything to have more kids. We're not going to buy a bigger house. We're not going to have nicer things. We want to create life, and we want to have a big family. We feel like that is our mission. Your parents, they said that, listen, we're going to have you, and we can only afford you, but we're going to basically give you everything we got. Yeah. What was that like growing up? Because I know the mindset that I had, but just for you, like, was that, do you, now that you have children, you have two, you have a daughter and a son, did you ever want to have a brother and sister? Or were you completely fine with that? Did you understand? Did you have a vision already for what your parents had laid out before you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me give you a fascinating background here. My mom is the second of 10.
Wow.
So, and my dad is the third of 3. And so my mom was the second of 10. So both my parents had siblings. So between the two of them, they had like 13 siblings, right? Which is crazy. Yeah. My mom literally raised siblings 8, 9, and 10 and there was a 18-month difference. So literally when my mom was 16, my aunt was born, which is so wild, right? And so, but what happened was when my mom and dad got married and they had their jobs, I think they just realized that they were living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a city in India, and they just couldn't, it didn't allow for the luxuries of life. And so I think that I'm assuming this, Josh, my parents looked around and like, we have a 1-bedroom apartment. I don't know how many kids can fit in here, but one would work just fine. And they decided to do that. And I think that's what happened. But to answer a deeper question there, I didn't know any different. Like I had no idea about sibling. I had no idea about friends. I had no idea. So what happened was, here's what I do know. What I do know is that I got to spend a lot of time with myself. And that was it was a requirement, right? And so I'll give you a really funny story. Well, my parents ran a small advertising agency because my mom and dad realized that their jobs. My mom was a nutritionist. My dad was a local university professor, and they were not making a lot of money. And my dad realized that he needed a better life for his son, so they both of them launched this small advertising agency. Knew nothing. They launched this advertising agency, and they launched it out of our 1-bedroom apartment. And the bedroom in the back was our bedroom, and everything else was kind of like the office. In the morning, it would like our dining table would just shift and it would all become an office space. And we had this rule in the house that said, well, if the door is closed to the bedroom, that means we have a meeting in place and you can't leave. And I was like, I understand, that makes sense. And so this didn't happen once, Josh. This happened multiple times where I'd be in the bedroom in the morning because it was a 1-bedroom apartment. I slept on the floor on a little rollaway-ish mattress, and my parents slept on the bed. That's all I know. Or almost all my life, like for the first 14 years of my life, I slept on a little rollaway mattress on the floor. I didn't have my own room, none of that. I had a little section of the armoire where I kept my stuff. So I didn't have a lot of clothes because it wouldn't fit, more than that wouldn't fit there. Right. And the cool part was I had to go to school, right? And so my parents would say, well, they had this meeting at 8 a.m. and they closed the door, and I'm like, okay, I can't leave. And so I remember sitting in the bedroom, and I'm like, I have no desk, nothing. So I'm sitting on the floor in the bedroom, and I just have water and cashews. Because I just have this bag of cashews. That was just the sustenance. I remember sitting there for like 4 or 5 hours, missing school and many days because I couldn't leave. And so I have, to me, my comfort food is like cashews, because I know that keeps me back to a safe place, which is really weird, by the way. So cashews and raisins, because my mom was like, hey, you need a little sustenance. And I would sit there and I would just read. Like, I had stacks of books and I would just read. And I used to just read and read because I had nothing else to do. I didn't have video games or anything like that. So I would just read. And I got to spend a lot of time with myself, which was really powerful. But flip that to today, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 children right now, 9 and 5. And man, I'll tell you, I would love to have 20.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have 0. My wife wouldn't want to have 20, but I would love to have 20, because the joy from the children are completely different. And maybe this is what you and I talk about today, which is, I think there is a concept of minimum standards. And I think that's what your parents went through. And that's what I'm going through right now, is where I'm like, hey, I'll make it work. The joy of having, I think my parents were like, hey, that was they chose we're going to focus our efforts this way. And they picked their priority, which is totally cool. I respect them for it. I love them for it. They're amazing parents. Yeah. If I had a choice right now, and I know my wife would disagree with me on more than 2, like, we're done. But if I had a choice, I would love to have 5 more, right? Mm-hmm. Like, unlimited number of children. I love children. I get along great with kids, and I would fix my life to make it work. Like, I would work harder, work smarter. I would do whatever it took to support the children. And I think that goes to, sometimes we just need to broaden our base and broaden the requirements that we need to fix. And I'll tell you this really interesting story. One of my best friends, she was graduating from the University of Chicago recently, right? And she, young gal, and she was like, hey, Sharran, career advice. This was like a few years ago. And I was like, okay, cool. She's like, I want to live in Chicago. And I said, cool. So she's like, I'm going to go after a $60,000 a year job. And I said, why 60,000? She's like, well, and she backed into this, right? And she said, well, it's a $60,000 a year job because to live here in downtown Chicago, to rent a car, to be able to go out and eat, and to have this life, I know that I need whatever, $3,000 a month or whatever it is. And so if I have that, this is going to be great. So I'm just going to look for $60,000 a year jobs. And I'm like, cool. So she went out and she started looking for $60,000 a year jobs. And lo and behold, what happened? She got herself a $60,000 a year job. Well, fascinatingly, the next year we were talking and she's like, you know what? I'd really like to drive a Ford Taurus. And I'm like, why a Ford Taurus? She's like, well, it does way better in the winter. And I'm like, that's weird, but fine. She goes, for that, I need to make a little bit more money because my Kia doesn't work. And I'm like, okay. I was like, just go ask for more money. She's like, well, yeah. And I'm like, what more do you need? She's like, well, if it's like 75, it would do better. So now she had lifted her minimum standard from 60 to 75. So she had her eyes set on 75. So not only did she was she looking at opportunities for 70, she actually found another job that was 75 because she was too afraid to have the conversation of asking for a raise. But she found a $75,000 a year job and she got that. But Josh, here's the crazy thing that happened. Her brother got sick and her brother needed medical care. That was not, many of it was not covered by insurance. She needed help at home. And this was going to be a 2-year thing. So she had to have her brother move in with her. Right now, her expenses were going to go from 75 to close to 130 a year. Wow. Right. So for her, so she was shocked. She didn't know what to do. So literally she upped her minimum standard from 75 to 130. And guess what? In like 60 days, she found 2 things. She found $100,000 a year job. And she built a $30,000 a year, roughly, Shopify store. She made it work because she had reset this minimum standard for that. And I think a lot of us, have this problem with the minimum standard. We take the minimum standard based on the environment that we're given, based on how we grow up. And suddenly when we're exposed to more, it changes. And so I'll give you, for those that are listening, I'll give you this one tip. And when I was in my first CEO mastermind group, and I'm looking around, and that was the day, Josh, we were sharing P&Ls. And I was like, wow, we're sharing our profit. Like, that's super personal. Like, I don't share P&Ls with anybody but my CPA. And I'm looking at other people's P&Ls. I'm like, you have a jet? Like, you have 3 yachts? Like, how is this possible? Yeah. And I was like, you are no smarter than I am. In fact, this is crazy that you have this. And my minimum standard got shattered. It changed. And I came home and I told my wife these words, and I said, honey, I think I need to start counting differently. Like, that was the key for me, right? Like, I think the entrepreneurs just count differently. Like, a lot of times we're like, wow, if I made another 3,000, that'd be great. Some people are like, hey, if I made another 30,000, that'd be great. Some people are like, hey, a 6-figure month is a good month. It's a completely, you're counting differently. Yeah. They're counting in zeros differently, in commas differently. And that was a big shift for me. And I think that this parenting example is just a minimum standard example, which is people decide what their minimum standard is, and then they build their lives around it. And if we can just shatter that minimum standard, I think it gets very exciting.
Yeah, I love it, buddy. I mean, it reminds me in the book that we've got coming out, we talk about moving your finish line. And I think that so many people just settle with this finish line. They don't realize that, no, that you've accomplished that. That's great, but you can always move your finish line. And we can dive into that. But I think you've really opened up an opportunity here to talk, because a lot of our people, this audience that we have on our podcast, they're out there grinding and they're doing things, and sometimes they're failing. I mean, and a lot of times they're failing, I should say. And how do you've had a lot of success in your life, but you've also had a lot of failures. You've also had a lot of setbacks. And, I would just like to know, like, was it a natural progression for you? Was it something that you learned from your parents? Was it something that you learned at Goldman Sachs? Like, what was it that allowed you to continue to push through the failures and not start to have that mindset that, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be, because, really I'm an immigrant. I was a tennis player. I'm not supposed to be doing this. What the nerve I have to go to Goldman Sachs. Like, help me understand that. Help our audience understand where your mindset was with that.
Yeah. This is a super personal thing, and I'm happy to share. So recently, about last year, I was working with my coach on this, who you've talked to. Yeah. And we did this exercise, which was very revealing for me. And we added up just in very raw numbers, all the money that I have made over the year, just made raw money that I've made. And we've had 5 exits in the last 19 years. So we've been lucky. Mm-hmm. But I've also added up all the money that I have lost. Literally wrote a check, lost the money, right? This is not including time spent. This is just straight up dollars in, dollars out, right? Yeah. Money made, money lost. Not expenses, money lost, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the interesting part. In my career so far, I have lost more than I have made.
No kidding.
How crazy is that for a second, right? Like, that is insane. Yeah. And like that, if we just said, wow, if I just not lost half of that, yes, I'd be on Tahiti right now. Right. It would be a completely different life. And but I think all the money lost is what contributed to, I'm 40 right now. It contributed to the learning that is going to give me and my family a great future, because I learned that the hard way. So let's take some real examples, right? So first example of, without incriminating people that were part of this money losing process. Sure. I mean, the first thing is, let's talk about investments. People make investments all the time. And Warren Buffett has this great quote. He's like, hey, but rule number 1 is don't lose money. Rule number 2 is look at rule number 1. Right. And I'm like, well, that would have been a completely different stratosphere of wealth right now. But the cool part is this. So there's a lot of slick salespeople out there. And there was this real estate project that me and my business partner invested in. This guy was as kind as could be, invited us to his house, showed us his personal financial statements, said, hey, you guys get paid before we get paid, blah, 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 blah. And not only did we write the check, we helped him raise more money. Okay. And it was 7 figures, right? And that was not so totally, both our investments and what we helped raise was 7 figures. And I was like, and I didn't have, what I've realized over this time is I unless I control the investment, I'm not bringing other people into this, because otherwise it's just like, well, if it goes wrong, I lost money too.
Right.
And right after the deal closed, literally no communication. I'm like, bro, I don't even need a lot. Just, I'm a big boy. I can deal with losing money and all of that, but just respond, right?
Yeah.
Just respond. And he blamed it on his partner. He blamed it on this person. It's been 5.5, 6+ years. I've probably clawed back maybe 60% of it, maybe over 5, and including legal fees and all of that. But it sucks when I have to do it with a friend. And it's gotten to the point where I lost friends because of that, because I got other people into this deal. And the crazy part is they don't care that I lost more than them.
Yeah.
They're like, Sharran, I appreciate that you lost $300,000 or whatever. I lost 30, so screw you. And I'm like, bro, but the crazy part is sometimes investments go south as well, even though they're shown up front. And lesson on stuff like that, lesson number one, we realized pretty quickly that my business partner and I, who has been my partner 20+ years, we're 50-50 partners in everything. And he said to me, he's like, maybe it's time for a charter. So we wrote an investment charter and we said, hey, here are the rules of how we actually invest in stuff. We have to know the operator at least 3 years. We have to, one of us has to have a personal relationship with him. Like literally we wrote down, it can't be more than, 2% of our assets. Like we wrote down these rules. And because of losing that charter came about. And that was better because without that, the charter would have never existed at all. So today we have the charter because it's super easy. Now when someone pitches me something, I'm like, well, not part of the chart. Super easy to say yes or no. Otherwise, we probably lost more. A lot of us are very easy to, once we have a tough experience, we don't go back and actually, there's no learning around it. And the charter was a big learning. So talk about that was a learning experience. I'll give you the second one, which I think you'll appreciate a lot. So we built a business. A very successful entrepreneur had this idea. And he said, hey, I want to partner with somebody that can build this idea. It'll be a partnership and we're going to build an app and it's going to be cool. And so I said, cool, I think I can do this. And I almost put the rest of my life on hold. And for 6 to 8 weeks, I literally went, I thought this was going to be the next big thing. I did it. I did my part really well. I actually did it without even signing agreements because I was like, hey, we'll figure all that out as I'm doing this because that's the process. And we figured all of that out. And I wrote a check. So I wrote a check. I worked for free. I built the team. I built the company. I built the process. I raised money. So we raised close to $2-ish million. I wrote a personal check. I worked in the business. I built the app. I built all of it. And then, the guy just went crazy. And it's to the point where I was like, talk about throwing in the towel at this point. I was like, okay, I have a choice right now. The choice is, looking back, I can fight for my stake and all of that, or I can walk away because I'm 8 weeks in and we still had success. So the question then became, well, like you said, when do you pull the plug?
Yeah.
I actually thought this was going to be my next swan song, my next hurrah. And so I said, well, how I should find some kind of continuity for all that I've built. So we found an operator who would actually take my place. I gave him all my equity. And I said, listen, whatever I've invested. Hopefully I'll get it back at some point. If I don't, that's cool. At least you can take this and move forward. I can go and sleep well because this was done. And today, if that happened today, Josh, I would light up legal counsel. Right. Yeah. But at that point, 10 years ago, I didn't know any different. And it, even with all the hard work, even with all the money raised, I have more investors pissed off at me. And it's tough. And I've realized over the years that regardless of how hard you work, stuff goes wrong. And sometimes you just have to pull the plug. That's a super abbreviated story, but a lot more happened than just that. And people always say this, right? Things go wrong. Like Sharran takes some responsibility, 100%.
Yeah, right.
There's no like partner did bad. Like I'm as much of part of the problem as someone else. It's something didn't work, right? And that would have been me, my capabilities, my skill set, my mindset, whatever. I was part of the problem too, but no telling at the end of the day, people lost money.
Yeah.
And that's not cool. If Warren Buffett's rule number one, like don't lose money, right? And
Right.
so just the learning from that was, I'll give you my learning around that is, a big learning for me is that partnerships for me, good ones that stand the test of time, end up being good 50-50 partnerships. I am very rarely doing, I don't mind doing a 20 to me, 80 to Josh. I don't mind doing that.
Right.
I don't like the reverse. I don't like doing 80-20 because that doesn't work for me. Because what I've noticed is one little extra percent doesn't motivate somebody. I'm okay because in my life, so I've almost unwound a lot of partnerships if they're not 50-50, because I think when you're 50-50, it helps a lot. And this is just me personally. So that was the next learning for me, which is 50-50 partnerships with the right people are much cleaner because it aligns incentives really well.
I couldn't agree with you more, man. And I tell you, you helped me obviously when we first started talking and you were mentoring me. I was kind of going through that transition. I was going into potentially a really big opportunity, and you just, one of the things that I really appreciated that you offered to me at the very beginning was you just started asking questions. And unfortunately, we get excited about, one of the things that we love as an entrepreneur is we get excited about these new ventures. We get excited about creation and what it can do and what the opportunities and the possibilities are. And we really don't sit back from it and ask the hard questions like, well, what if this happens? Or what if this comes about? Or what if we go down this road, right? And I think it's so imperative that as a CEO, as a leader, that you have to have people that you're sitting at their feet. I've said this so many times. I mean, how many people do you have around at your board table? How many people do you have that are mentoring you, that have been there, that can give you great advice? I love it. One of the things, Sharran, that you spoke about, and it was one of your podcasts, I think that you did with Bedros. I loved it. It was when your father told you to write the check to that person that you wanted to get advice from. And I'm telling you, I'm going to do that. Like I really am. I'm waiting for that opportunity because I do think it was such a powerful moment that you were talking about. And when you're willing to write a check to show the value that person would bring to you, it's amazing how they're going to help you and pour into you. And sometimes they might not because they just can't, but I just love that concept. Tell me about mentorship. I know that's a big thing that you are in that realm and you do an amazing job. I obviously with myself, with many other entrepreneurs and CEOs, just share with people like why you feel like that is such an important thing that we all need to be looking at. Yeah.
I'll give you two quick stories. The first one is that day my father said to me, I'll give you the real words, right? My dad said to me, so I went to this conference, I saw this lady speak, and I talked to my dad on my way home. My dad said, well, do you think she can help you? I said, I think so. He goes, well, ask her. I was like, well, I don't know what to ask her. He's like, well, write her an email. And my dad said, use the script. He says, dear so-and-so, I was at your presentation. I loved what you had to say. I would like to offer you $10,000 as a symbol of my seriousness. This was like 20 plus years ago. And I had like $14,000 to my name or something like that.
Yeah.
And so he said, but the key words were this, I'd like to offer you $10,000 as a symbol of my seriousness. And I said, I don't expect one-on-one sessions. I just expect you to prioritize my email communication, right? And she was my first mentor, which is amazing. But the interesting part here though, Josh, is someone actually heard that story on some podcast, and I am not joking. He was on a plane. He was in the process of selling his business.
Uh-huh.
He literally, he took a picture. He wrote a check to me for $10,000. He used the same exact word. I don't need to meet with you. I just need you. He took a picture of this check on his tray table on a plane, and he emails it to me. He's like, I have this check. When can I talk to you? And I'm like, this is crazy, right? And
Brown, man.
I've supported. He's actually right now, as we record this, he's in the process of selling his business for like mid 8 figures, which is very cool.
Wow.
And so that said, let's talk about this mentoring idea. The first thing is, if people will always tell me things like, well, if Josh can do it, you can do it too. Sharran can do it, you can do it too. Well, that's totally not true. Like right. It's super hard it's crazy to say that, because how is that even remotely true, because they don't have you, they don't have your strengths, your weaknesses, your idiosyncrasies, where you grew up. They don't have you. So I've been thinking a lot about this, Josh, and I said, well, if I can't be Josh, if I can't model Josh, if I can't model Steve Jobs, if I can't model Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Elon Musk, who do I model? Well, I'm thinking, and I was like, well, I bet they have a support system. So instead of modeling Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, can I model their support system? Because now, if I can install the same support system that they have for myself, maybe it'll bring out the best in me.
Yeah.
And that's what completely switched it on for me. I was like, I'm going about this all wrong. Like, I can't, just because Steve Jobs woke up at 3:45 or Elon Musk did this or took risk, like, I can't do that. If Elon Musk put 97% of his net worth at risk, like, I can't do that. Like, that's not how I'm wired. He did, and that's because that's how he is. But he did that because he got some support. Yeah, he made the final decision, but what is the support system? And so I've been on this mad kind of dash of trying to figure out everybody's support system. So when I talk to somebody and I see that they're doing really well, I like try to sneak my way into asking questions about, like, well, how did you do that? And my favorite thing is, where did you learn that? And most of the time they'll say, well, YouTube videos. And I'm like, bro, come on. Like, there's more than a YouTube video that you, like, how many 4,000 YouTube videos that it took you to learn this?
Right.
It's not like there's an insight that happened. Oh, I went to an event. I hired this person. I went to this seminar. I read this book. Who was the book? Cool. Who's that person? Awesome. Like, I want to know that. And I think modeling the support system is a significantly better approach, because now it forces you to do two things. One, you've done a very thoughtful job of saying, all right, I really like how Josh has set up his life. Who's his support system? I'm going to have same for me. That's number one. Yep. And worst case scenario, you have an amazing support system.
Yes.
Like, that's the best part. So if I could, if I just kind of, mapped my life out in 5-year chunks from 0 to today, I could probably put dots on where there were kind of these, big shifts, right? And I will tell you, always before the big shifts came some support system-based experience, some mentor, coach, advisor, guide, somebody that took me under their wing and helped me accelerate that curve. And I didn't believe it until I retrospectively saw it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. One, I'm super thankful that I see it now and not 20 years from now. Two, this is crazy that I didn't see this 15 years ago, because I would have put all the money that I'd spent doing other things like travel or what, I would have put it in that. And this would have completely changed the very trajectory of my life. So for me, it is, if I could change anything, it would be, one, model other people's support systems, because it allows you to get to know them better. And two, I would invest in that upfront, because now I call this the idea, Josh, of you outsource your success to someone else, right?
That's good, buddy. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Now it's not your problem anymore. You're like, Sharran, help me. Now it's my problem. So now I have this insane responsibility, which I'm like, I have to help Josh to do this, because I feel I want to see him succeed, and I am the support system. And when you can outsource success, it's not for accountability though. Like, it's not to show up at 5 a.m. at the gym. That's not what this is about, but this is for responsibility. That's not accountability versus responsibility. So I'm a big fan of, I have no problem writing the check. And I think you and I talk about this often, which is, it's weird to just ask somebody to just pick their brain, because you've spent 3 decades accumulating this experience. Yes, you can give it to me in 3 minutes. I get it. But that is karmically unfair. That's all it is. It's just unfair. Mm-hmm. And my network, my learnings, I've learned all of that. And it's not for me. It's just there needs to be karmic balance. That's why this exists, right? For whoever. And the sooner that folks can get around that and say, okay, this is not anything more than a karmic balance, because otherwise I'm going to pay for this. You're going to pay for this in some way. Right. And it's easier to pay for it now and have the balance, as opposed to pay for it 10 times more later. And you don't want that. And that's why I'm so excited for your book to come out, because think about this, right? A $15 investment into someone has spent 18 months putting together. Right. Yeah. Like, that's why it blows my mind that people wouldn't take a book and a mentor in the form of a book. So I'm a big fan of buying speed and outsourcing success.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things, on top of what you just said right there, I want to highlight, you are such an amazing connector. I have just really appreciated, since I've gotten to know you, not only are you an amazing connector, but one of the things that you constantly are asking is, what can I do for you? Like you're just, I mean, and I know it's a simple concept, but once again, that's what's so important about having really great people around you that you bring into your table, that you bring into your spheres, because I think I think especially with entrepreneurs, we all want to grow. Like we don't want to suck. We don't want to not be successful, right? But sometimes we just don't know the path. We're willing to do the work. Just help guide me through that path. Help be that person there to help cut down the trees so that I can see a little bit more clearly, because right now I'm in a forest and I don't know which way to go, right? And you've done an exceptionally great job in my life to help me from a different point of view to say, hey, I know this doesn't seem obvious to you, but this is something you need to be looking at. This is something that you should venture into. This is something that you should possibly look at. You should change. And it was those aha moments for me. So I will tell you, man, I'm living proof that what you're saying is so true. And I know that you, of course, are as well too, from the mentors that you have. So we've been on this. It's hard to believe, but this has been a great long podcast here. I'd like to leave these guys with one more thing. And this was something in my research of getting to know you a little bit more that was, it's definitely something I am implementing. That is like hands down, it is changing my formula when I come home. You had an article and you talked about one hack that it was really personal to you because obviously you were finding yourself not being the father that you wanted to be when you showed up at home. And, one of the comments I love that you said is that it's not just about 10Xing one area of your life. You want to do that naturally in all these areas. So we all want to be great dads. We all want to be great moms. We all want to be great husbands and wives, not just in our business, but in our life, right? We want to be 10Xed in our life. Give them the hack about not showing up and pulling into the driveway when you're on the phone. This is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, totally. And I think you nailed it on the 10X hack as well, because people need to realize that you can't just 10X one part of your life. Everything else will lift up as well. But the same goes the other way too, Josh. You can't just drop. You can't just say, well, I'll let my weight slide. Yeah. And everything else will drop with that. So whatever happens up top happens down below as well. And that's why, that's why us constantly working on pushing upwards is really important. So it's impossible to have a 10X company and not leveling up in the other areas. Like, you have to become a better entrepreneur. You have to become a better productivity person. You have to become a better, you have no choice, right? And that the cost of a 10X business is the cost of leveling everything else up. And the cost of leveling everything else up is getting more margin, because you need time to grow, right? Like you need time to grow. So this happened. I think most people can kind of connect with this. This happened for months where I would drive home and want to squeeze every ounce of my waking time out. I'm like, I just take that call in the car. So I would take the call in the car, drive home, pull into my garage, and I'll see my garage door open, and the kitchen door will open. My kids will come running out. They'll start banging on the door, and I'm still on the phone, and I just raise my finger and I say 1 minute, 1 minute, and they'll be there. They'll play around for a while, and then they'll walk back in. And this happened week after week, month after month, week after week. Same thing. I'll pull in, garage door will open, kids will come running out. And it's the most joyful thing for me to see the kids run out of the garage, right? Well, the crazy part was, one day I pulled in, I'm on the phone, the garage door opens, and nobody comes running out. It's like, interesting. Maybe they're busy. Second day it happened. Third day it happened. Well, I just realized that they knew that I was just going to say 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, and not talk to them. And it broke my heart. It just totally broke my heart. And it was probably one of the saddest days of my recent life that I can remember, because to me, the most joyful thing is opening the door and seeing my kids run into my arms. Like that makes my whole day. Yeah. Well, so I said, I got to do something about this. So I made a decision that I'm going to change my state before I do that. And all I did now was, as soon as I pull into my neighborhood, I just pull over into a spot where I get good service. I just pull over and I finish up a call there. I just finish the call there. And even if I'm late, I don't mind being late, but I'm not on the phone. I just don't mind being late. And I sit there, Josh, and then I have this app, and it's called Buddhify, Buddhify. It's not fancy. It's like I use, again, it's a support system, right? Right. You can get 5 to 7 minute guided meditations. I put the app on, I hit play. It's something that changes my state from being the kind of go-getting entrepreneur to stop to being dad. And to being a husband, to being with my family. And I hit play on that meditation. And as soon as that meditation's over, I turn my phone into airplane mode, And that's my ritual. And I pull into my garage, because that way, when I pull into my garage, I'm back in my state. And now, like, I have seen my kids will just come running out, even today. And it's my son less, though. My daughter's 4.5 and she does that. Yeah. But I'm not putting up my finger or anything like that saying, hey, 1 minute anymore. And that's changed. This changed everything. And it's just the smallest hack ever. Yeah. That's changed me, to force me to have a better state.
Well, and here's the thing. It's like, it's so obvious that we should be doing it, but we don't. Once again, it's not that we don't want to do it. We just don't know that that's something that we should do. So that's why it's so important. So buddy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you pouring into our guests, pouring into me as you do, man. You've just been, once again, I just can't say enough great things about you and the man that you are. And I love that you are such a great father and husband, and how important that is in your life, man. And that is something that means a lot to me. I love the fact that you were in the Kingsman shirt. Everybody knows about Kingsman on this. We've talked about it many times. So we got Sharran representing Kingsman as well too. And there's no better representation than you, brother. So how do people connect with you? You give a lot. I mean, you've got a lot of content that you give out there. You've got a lot of programs that people can be a part of. I love, one of the things that you have is your 4-week MBA that I know that you developed that. That is an amazing class. What's the best way for people to connect? And I know that you've got some stuff for our audience here.
Yeah, totally. So first, thank you for having me. I think this is, you know how much I respect you, and I do anything for you. This is, so the easiest way, if people like the social media stuff, just grab me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way. But if you liked this and you want to support Josh and want to go deeper with the stuff, I have this 4-week MBA, and I'll tell you how it all came about. I looked back at the last 20 years and I pulled out my favorite 20 lessons that I've learned. And instead of building a 97 million hour course around it, I recorded a 10-minute segment for each lesson. So it's 20 lessons and it's 10 minutes each. And it's totally free. It's just my gift to you. There's no funnel. There's nothing like that. So it's at 4weekmba.com. So it's the number 4weekmba.com. If you like this, I think you will like that. Again, it's 4weekmba.com. It's my 20 lessons from the last 20 years. And it's in a 10-minute bite-sized chunk each. So I think you'll appreciate that a lot.
Fantastic. And you can always go to Sharran.com too to find more information about it. He's got a ton of blogs, videos that he's done in the past, so you can just get more of his wisdom that he's sharing. And I tell you, you just do it so freely and open, man. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why you're such a success, because you care so much about people. So, buddy, thank you again, dude. This was awesome. And it is just always a pleasure anytime I've got to talk with you. And now I get to share this with everybody else. So this is just a really great opportunity for them too.
Hey, man, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, hey, listen, I know that you guys took some massively great things away from this podcast with Sharran. So not only do I hope you implement it in your life, I hope that it impacts you, but I hope you just share this. I know that there's people in your life. You have other people that you're leading that need to hear this message, some great hacks, some great things that they can do mentally as they prepare for that next step and that next opportunity to lead in their life. So take advantage of that and please share it. So we will definitely look forward to seeing you guys on the very next episode.
Oh